Hi everyone. I'm going to rewire a Les Paul. You can see here that I've got some pickups to put in this. This is a cheap Chinese guitar, and the merits of rewiring a Chinese guitar firstly are that the wiring sometimes can be not very good. So I've found that the wiring can be unreliable, or the actual hardware, the switches can be unreliable, so I very often change those sort of things, the pots, the switches. They're quite cheap to change and swap out. The more expensive your guitar is, there are options that you have. You know, if you have an Epiphone and you decide to swap the pickups out, depending on the types of pickups that you're putting in, you may have no benefit at all. I mean, if you're putting in a set of, you know, sort of standard kind of, you know, a standard upgrade, rather than putting in really hot pickups or something that's substantially different. I've seen people swap vintage style pickups and put a really high quality set of vintage style pickups in for no apparent gain. So there's a cost element, because a Chinese guitar is always going to be a Chinese guitar. It's never going to be worth more, certainly not much more, if you've got expensive pickups in it, because some people, they tend to buy the guitar and then they'll strip the pickups, put some cheap pickups in and sell the guitar and keep the pickups. That sort of thing does go on. So what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to put a set of single coils in this. Now I picked these up on eBay and I've not seen these in any guitar before, so I decided that I would try them out, put them in. And what I'm going to do is put kind of 50s wiring in this, and then, you know, single coils. So it is a very 50s type setup, and then you've kind of got something a little bit different, you know, from the standard 60s onwards Les Pauls with the humbuckers. So that's why I'm going to do this as a kind of little film. There are two ways to wire up a volume pot on a Les Paul, and it's one from wiring it from the side lug. There are 3 lugs on a pot. And there's another way of wiring it in from the centre, so the pickup goes into the centre, or the pickup can go into one of the side lugs. And depending which way round you do this, you get, some say you get a slightly difference in tone, especially when you roll the volume pot off. And there are other things you can do to the volume pot, obviously, to compensate if you go for the wiring when the sound gets duller as you turn the volume down. Then what you can do is put a treble pleat bypass type circuit in there, which is either a capacitor or a capacitor resistor, various things like that. So no fancy switches in this one, no fancy push-pull pots or anything. Just going to keep it simple and see what happens. So what I'm going to do is work outside the guitar as much as possible. I don't want to get soldering iron into the compartment. So I'm going to be pulling all the existing pots out and then going to desolder them all. That's my first task. And then simply put these in and then wire. I'm going to wire the switch up. I'm going to probably swap all the wires out and try and get rid of some of this cheap wire. Hopefully it'll be a bit more reliable. So anyway, I'm going to start on that and then kind of show you as I go along, I guess. Seems hot enough. Laborious job this is. Out the way first. I previously experimented with a wiring where everything was earthed and the wires were separately earthed. I didn't really like it. I was kind of going to chop all this wire. I don't know. Sometimes desoldering is easier when you have some solder on the tip. So I think, I can't remember how many Les Pauls I've wired, but a lot. I've had everything in these things, from reverse, phase, pickups to series parallel. Treble bleed stuff. I think I'm just going to chop this. The other thing about doing wiring is just not taking up too much time, because ultimately your upgrades are just never worth it. So what you see in a Les Paul switch whichever way the switch is. If the switch this side is down here, it means these two lugs are connected. So you've got an input and an output, and then flick the switch up and it means these two are now connected. If this is your earth, obviously that's the chassis. Chassis needs to be earthed, and that goes through into your earth circuit, which just connects to the back of the pots, and then to the string earth, which goes up through, usually into the bridge. So that's the three-way selector switch, and that's all going to be pulled through, and I'm going to change all that wiring out when the pickups come out. So wiring the pots, doing the backs of the pots, I'm probably going to make up a little harness thing and just work on them externally, and then it's easier to work on that way, and wire it all in neatly, pull all this crap out. So desoldering is usually a waste of time. You are better off just snip it all and just start again. Especially if you've got component failures. If you've got a component failure somewhere, you just don't know. You just don't know what's causing it. So I doubt I'll use these pots again. What I usually do when I remove anything is just test them first. So I understand that for most people who've never done any wiring, this can all seem quite daunting. You know, some people tend to think that it's complicated, and really it's down to soldering. You know, you need a soldering iron. This one's you can set the temperature up on it, which is ideal. You soon know if you don't have enough temperature in the iron. But even when desoldering, if you've got a little bit of solder on the iron, it just helps it break it off immediately. And here we're just down to the back of the pot. And that's one off completely. Always best to test these. And the reason I'm using crocodile clips, they act as heat sinks. You know, you don't want component failures due to heat. And you just keep repeating the procedure until you've stripped the whole guitar of all of its electronics. And then you can start again in one neat go. I started soldering when I was probably, I don't know how old I was. I think it was 14 or 15. I had about different circuits, you know, and obviously anything that's got electronics in it can break, and the average guitarist, I guess, must go to the repair shop and say, my guitar's broken, you know, fix it. But actually, if you know how your guitar works, then if you're on stage and something goes wrong, you can have a fair idea about what to do about it. I mean, what happens if you're one of these people that takes one guitar to a gig, and something goes wrong, you know, what are you going to do? You know, usually someone says, oh, does anybody know how to solder? And it's, you know, I remember going to one gig and the bass player had a problem with his bass. He says, anybody got any solder or a soldering iron? And I had my kit with me and I said, yeah, I do. And then he wrecked he soldered his bass, got his bass working, but he wrecked my soldering iron. He bent the tip or something. But obviously the other benefit is, you know, you take it to a repair place, you know, it may not be cheap. And as I was saying about putting pickups, changing the spec of your guitar, you know, I mean, if you do it to some guitars, you'll devalue it by working on it. You know, you can no longer claim it's in its original spec. There's a big lump of solder on here, so it's kind of protesting a little bit. So yeah, I started messing about with wiring on an old guitar, and then so I did all different wiring options, just experimented and just kept going, and then eventually I was studying music, and then I sort of came to a crossroads with it, and then I decided that I would get a job for a bit. So I went to work at an electronics factory. So the effort that I put in to rewiring my guitars eventually led me to a paid job for a while I was still working on my guitar licks. So it had its benefits. And I've since wired strats, tellies. If I'm not happy with the sound, I I can change it. And I think that's the benefit. You know, if there's something wrong with the volume pot and you're not happy with the, you know, you instinctively know, is it the volume pot? You know, are you getting the, you know, it might not be the tone, but it might be, well, it might be the tone because you might be turning the volume pot down, something horrible's happening. Now I've got a capacitor here, and to desolder a capacitor you have to be very, very careful, because it's going from one of the lugs of the potentiometer to the back of the pot, and capacitors are very, very heat sensitive. So what I do is I use these little crocodile clips, and they act as a heat sink. So when you heat up any surface, what happens is you heat the surface and the heat travels up the wire of the capacitor, and then it hits the crocodile clip, before it gets to the capacitor itself. I guess a lot of people might be looking at this and thinking, well, it's really fiddly. You know, well, yes it is. But ultimately, you'll be in control of your so that's the capacitor out of there. If you pull a component such as a capacitor out of a guitar and you're thinking of reusing it, you'll need to circuit test it first. Anything you pull out that's been heat treated, you want to circuit test. Because heat and components may not necessarily go together. They are designed to accept heat, but only a certain amount or for a certain period. Another pot done. You end up with a mass of wires, and you just, you know, don't worry about it, just, you know, just pull it all out. And you keep going like that until, you know, there's four pots. Pot meaning potentiometer. One side is ground, the other side is a signal, and then as you turn the pot, you turn it either to full signal or it filters through into ground as you turn it down until eventually the whole signal is grounded, and that's why one of the lugs ends up at ground. And it is fairly essential to be able to read circuit diagrams, because what happens in a guitar, you've got the pickups go into the pots then are fed to outputs from the two volume pots. There's a simultaneous output. One output goes to the switch and the other output goes to the tone, and the tone just filters through to ground. And then from the middle lug of the switch travels all the way back down the guitar again through into the jack socket. And that's why it goes from the ground and the signal wire from here into the jack socket. And there's just one more pot to do. Socket. So I'm going to do the final part, and then we'll resume in a minute. Oh, look at the crap in there. That's why a lot of the compartments are full of this crap that are left over from the manufacturers. I mean, you'll rarely find that in a Gibson or a high-end guitar, because they clean them out, but they leave all sorts of crap in these insides. And I had actually cleaned it once, but there's obviously more in there, and that pot has just got gunked right up. And as someone famous once said, the day that everything is made in China, everything will be crap and fall apart. And there is some truth in that. So it's worth building up your own set of tools. Not only will you need a soldering iron and solder, you'll need any kind of grippers, like mini pliers, these little things. Anything just to stop you burning your hands, because the last thing, if you're a guitarist, if you're gigging, you don't really want to turn up at a gig with burnt fingers. As I learnt to my great cost once or twice, not taking the correct precautions. If you're watching this outside the UK, I know you call this solder, so I'm happy to say each to their own. You can call it what you like, but I'll probably, unless I remember to actually say the American word and upset a few Brits. Is it solder? Solder. Yeah, we tend not to say solder. I don't know how you spell it. S-O-L-D-E-R, but I guess we all English evolved as a language. Who cares? I don't care how people say words, really. There's some strange accents in the UK, so you can go to the south, like in Cornwall or Devon, or you can go to the north, just in England alone, in Newcastle or Manchester, Liverpool or wherever. People will speak with their own accent, and it makes us different, and I guess we should celebrate our differences. Because if everything was the same, life would be boring. So, where's my big crocodile clip? So I'm not really too worried about these capacitors. I mean, if one doesn't work, you know, it's not really a big deal. They're a matter of pence, really. Depends where you buy them from. I've seen lots of videos of people saying about capacitors that you all used to use these orange drop capacitors and the rest of it. Well, I don't know. To me, the jury is out on capacitor types. Some people say that they're, you know, amazing, whatever. I don't know. Yeah, it's still hot. That's all the pots out. So yeah, you know, if something doesn't work after you stripped it, just get another one. Really shouldn't take too long to do this sort of thing. You know, you don't really want to take up too much of your precious time. You know, if you're a musician, you need to be practicing. You know, you don't want to be spending time messing about with electronics. Yes, it's part of your sound. You know, if you're an electric guitarist, yeah, you need a sound. This is the reason why if you're changing pickups, you're looking for your own unique sound, I would have thought. Or you're trying to emulate a sound that you know and that you like.
So why not make the commitment to becoming a better player by subscribing to the channel? You can subscribe here.